He is a trial attorney at Cohen Jensen. He was a Pepperdine baseball player. I've known him for over 25 years. He's developed a unique niche in the law where he is in trial literally, I don't know, somewhere just short of a dozen times a year, meaning his expertise in understanding how to argue to a jury. He's one of my good friends, and he now lives not in California, but in Dallas, Texas, and he is Dave Sugden. What's up, Dave?
Hey, Will. How's it going?
Good. And you have not, Dave, yet, because I am a failure as a friend, met one of my other lifelong friends who I've known for 25 some odd years, but he's been my buddy since law school at the University of Texas. He's one of the best criminal defense attorneys I know. He's from the Shapiro law firm. I know more about him than I should ever share with anyone on this program. It is Todd Shapiro as well on the Will Cain Show. What's up, Todd?
Hey, Will. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you're here, both of you. I'm glad you both are very serious and buttoned down to take on this very serious issue this morning. It's good to see you both in your professional environment. Here's where I want to start. I do believe this, and I want to say this to the audience. These two guys are not just my friends, but they're some of the best attorneys I know. So when we were going to talk about addressing live and analyze the testimony of Michael Cohen in the case against Donald Trump, I thought I want to go to two people who I know what they're talking about. So, Todd, let me start with you. I just want to start with an open-ended question. What do you make so far? We're half a day into Michael Cohen, into a case that's gone on now, I believe, in its third week against Donald Trump. What do you think about the testimony of Michael Cohen?
Well, I find it to be remarkable from a number of different angles, Will. I mean, the first thought that popped into my mind is, as my role as an attorney over the last 25 years, when I have clients come to me with information, it's governed by what's called the attorney-client privilege, which you're well aware of, which means all our conversations, things that my clients tell me, I cannot divulge. I mean, I have an obligation to remain confident. Those matters remain confidential. And the idea that in this most public of spectacle, this most public of trials, that the former president's closest confidant, who he had no doubt, undoubtedly, an attorney-client relationship with and confidentiality, is now taking the witness stand to testify those things that we hold sacred as attorneys.
I still haven't received an adequate and satisfactory answer, Todd. You and I texted over the weekend on why there's not some protection for Donald Trump under the attorney-client privilege. I do have some answers to that perhaps this morning, but I find it odd it's not a bigger part of the story. What about you, Dave? What's your initial reaction to the testimony of Michael Cohen?
Well, I think first and foremost is that he's ostensibly a key witness in the case because he's the one who essentially is going to be the person with firsthand knowledge of what Donald Trump is alleged to have done. And yet we're in the third week. And I think what's going on is he's going to be a terrible witness. He's going to be awful. And so I think the prosecutors are sort of burying him at the end and sort of trying to get as much evidence as they can out first, and then hopefully making this key witness a footnote to the case.
I thought about you, Dave, when I thought about 2 weeks of witness testimony to some extent that had to have bored the jury. You know, you and I talk so much, and Todd, Dave is, outside of honestly what you do, Todd, and that is criminal law. In the civil world, I can't think of anybody who probably does more in the courtroom than Dave. And so you give a lot of analysis to Dave of performance and persuasion and the way you present something to the jury, understanding that they are emotional beings. They're not justice robots. And you have to think a lot about that and how you approach the jury. And I thought about you, Dave, when I saw witness after witness before you got to Stormy Daniels, before you got to Michael Cohen. And I wondered if you're not, as prosecutors, just boring the jury to the point of almost checking out of the trial. I did wonder about that performance, Dave.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that the prosecutors probably prefer boredom over what could happen with Stormy and Michael Cohen. In other words, they've both had varying versions of what they're going to testify to at trial. Michael Cohen is a ex-con. He's committed perjury multiple times. He's got varying versions of this story. And so I think the prosecutor probably thought, let's make an opening statement that's sort of splashy, and then let's sort of be adults in the room for at least as long as we can until we have to call Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen. But the problem is, when you put these cases on, you're telling your story through witnesses, and it's going to turn on the credibility of these witnesses. And Stormy Daniels and Cohen, they are not credible. I mean, Cohen seems allergic to the truth.
Right.
And so it's going to be hard for the prosecutors to sort of keep this inertia and then deal with Michael Cohen.
Todd, the best I could tell, and like I said, I texted you over the weekend, I don't know why not more has been made of the attorney-client privilege. This morning during live rolling coverage on Fox, I did see Jonna Spilbor, who's a criminal defense attorney, bring it up as well. She said what you said. I can't believe there's not more being made of the attorney-client privilege. Best I can tell, Todd, there's a fraud and crime exception to the attorney-client privilege, and that's at the heart of this case. The prosecutors are alleging fraud and crime. Literally, those are what their allegations are and why we're here today. So I guess to some extent, that just opens the door, and Michael Cohen willingly then, and that's part of the thing, Todd. It is the client's privilege, but how do you enforce it through suit, which he tried to do in 2018, and then he dropped it, talking about Trump dropped it against Cohen. But, I mean, if Cohen wants to do it, what else can you do to stop Cohen from talking?
I think in the context of the trial, you're absolutely right. Could there be some sort of a legal objection made by Trump's team that any of the matters that Cohen's trying to get into are governed by attorney-client privilege? But that's not really a law, and it's not a rule of evidence. And so I don't think that would dictate whether or not the jury gets a chance to hear it. The other aspect of this that occurred to me is, Michael Cohen is no longer a licensed attorney anywhere. He's been disbarred. He's a convicted felon. He's went to the penitentiary. Those responsibilities of a practicing attorney, a licensed attorney, breaking that attorney-client privilege could certainly result in sanctions from the state bar, could result in suspension, disbarment. But heck, he's already been disbarred. So what can they? It's almost like, what can they do to me now? I mean, if I go ahead and divulge the information that I have, even if it was privilege at the time, I'm not a lawyer anymore. So what are they going to do to me?
So I want to ask you, Todd, I'm going to follow up on something Dave said when he was talking about the credibility of Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen. And I try to be self-aware. If I'm talking on Fox, if I'm listening to Fox, there's a lot of conversation about the credibility of these two people. Michael Cohen is a convicted liar and perjurer. But if I were to tune in to, say, CNN, and I'm trying to be self-aware and see all sides of this, I'm sure something they would be saying, and they are saying, is, yeah, but Michael Cohen lied for Donald Trump. And now, he's seen the light and he's telling the truth. And so he's telling the truth against Donald Trump. Is there anything to that? Like, okay, my lies in the past have been, for the man who's now standing on trial. But now it's almost lending me credibility to say, hey, I'm telling you I lied in the past, and here's the truth about Trump.
No, I don't think so. And the reason why is, and I've gone through this many times with witnesses that have changed their version or their story over the course of an investigation and then want to get on the witness stand and say something different. When your story changes and you say, I was telling the truth then, or I was lying then, and now I'm telling the truth now, that never resonates. It just doesn't. I mean, it makes you look like a liar. It makes you look dishonest. It makes you look untrustworthy. And at the end of the day, not a credible witness. And so how they put any stock into somebody that says, I know I said these things in the past, but I was lying then. Listen to me now. I'm telling the truth. I promise you I'm telling the truth. I mean, that just seems to ring hollow in my opinion.
I mean, do you agree, Dave? I mean, I think, instinctually we all agree. I mean, they write cliche books about this and advice books about this. Like, one lie burns something that's very hard to build, and that's a reputation. That's over a lifetime, much less over the span of a few weeks in a jury box, right? But I think my only thing, Todd, to what you said, and I'm going to put this to Dave, though, is I feel like that's true, what you said. And I'm sure it's true throughout your career. And everyone watching, I'm sure it's true through your life. If somebody lies to you, it's very hard for you to reestablish or grant them trust. But I almost feel like in life, and I'm now wondering in a courtroom if there's an exception for Donald Trump. Like everything, and Dave, this is something you know, everything's emotional. And so if Cohen is in there saying something that those jurors want to hear, which is, I knew I hated Donald Trump, if we're assuming the vast majority of them are liberal, and they're probably pretty anti-Trump, They're going to listen to Cohen and go, see, now he's telling the truth because he's on my side. I just wonder if there's not exception for Trump.
Yeah, I think there is some intuitive appeal to that narrative. In other words, I anticipate the lawyer that's going to elicit the testimony on direct try to build that narrative. In other words, okay, you lied yesterday. Why'd you do that? And he'll say, I was being loyal to Trump. I felt pressure from the boss, et cetera, et cetera. But here I am now telling the truth. And there is some intuitive appeal to that story where the person is now coming clean, saying, I'm a different person now. But Cohen's unique. In other words, he wrote a book called Disloyal. Okay, so in his book, when he's talking about coming clean, he doesn't exactly create a narrative that is going to be consistent with his testimony. In other words, when he talks about himself being the quarterback of all of these payments. In other words, he has version number 1, which is nothing happened. Version number 2, something happened, but I was the genius behind it. Now it's version number 3, Trump knew it all. And so there is intuitive appeal of the person that's coming clean, explaining why they were dishonest yesterday, but Cohen's a unique witness.
So to your point, Dave, about version number 3, Trump knew it all. Here's what's happened this morning so far. Michael Cohen on direct, his attorneys or the prosecutors for Donald Trump calling him as their witness, have elicited today information essentially about not yet Stormy Daniels, but Karen McDougal. Karen McDougal was a Playboy model. Her story was bought by American Media, the publisher of the National Enquirer. The allegation is that Trump, who is buddies with David Pecker, the CEO of the National Enquirer, ran what's called a catch and kill scheme. The catch and kill scheme is you hear there is some story about you that's bad out there. You buy the rights to the story. You never publish the story so that the story goes away. And Cohen has testified this morning that Trump had to know everything. He had to know, that's his currency, he said. But you work for Trump, he has an open door policy. You have to walk in. You have to give him information. So Cohen works with the National Enquirer to get this story to make payments. And his allegation, Todd, this morning is Trump knew it all. That's the way it worked. I know we're building this probably, stepping stone by stepping stone. But let's be clear. That's not a crime. Even if everything Cohen said is true, everything I just described does not add up to a crime.
Well, I'm with you 100%. Does it seem seedy, unseemly, something we don't want from our leaders and their legal team? Yes. I mean, I can understand that aspect to it, but no, I mean, that entire scenario you just laid out is there's no laws against what's going on there. I mean, that is an acceptable practice, maybe not a desired one, but it doesn't seem like there's any criminal behavior associated with it. I agree with you.
Right. And to be clear to the audience now, and I know they've heard this over several weeks, but it's almost like we're, hammer meeting nail at this moment. Whether or not Trump participated even willingly, knowingly, and used his own money to execute non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. Catch and kill would be a much more salacious way to, hush money as well, would be a much more salacious way to describe it. A very dry and corporate way to describe it would be a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. Whether or not Trump executed NDAs, in order for it to become a crime, this will be hard for you, Todd, I think. Can you tell me what has to be established? Because in order to do that, you're going to have to also know the crime that's alleged by Alvin Bragg.
I don't. I mean, you clearly do. So go ahead and tell me.
No, I'm saying that he hasn't made it clear. Is the problem. No. I'm saying he has to, in order for this to be a crime that has not run its statute of limitations, he has to prove that Trump not executed NDAs, but that he falsely recorded it in his company's bookkeeping. But that still wouldn't be enough. He'd have to show then that was in service of I don't know, running for president. This is where it's hard to define the crime, like campaign finance. My point is, and this is why I put that to you, because it's impossible to answer these questions, all we're doing so far is establishing something that is not a crime. Now, again, it could be a stepping stone, and maybe the prosecutors are leading Cohen up to this big hammer, meat, nail moment where he's got audio or he's got proof that Trump said, record it under legal expenses, even though I'm doing it to influence a potential presidential campaign?
I think that's the leap. At least I have a difficult time with from a legal analysis standpoint. Is all these activities, the hush money, the payoffs, the India, whatever you want to call them. How do you then bridge that over to I'm using that to influence a presidential election? I think that's the missing piece to me. That okay, even if we believe all that stuff took place, now tell me how that goes from a moral issue. And leaps over into a criminal issue by discussing how it connects to the presidential election. I think that's a very big disconnect for me, at least.
It's establishing intent, right? So we're going to have to get inside Donald Trump's mind at some point. And Cohen's going to have to be, to your point, Dave, a credible person to tell us about the mindset of Donald Trump, Dave.
Yes. And what's interesting is, after the McDougal piece ends, we then have the Stormy Daniels, because both McDougal and Stormy Daniels were represented by the same lawyer, a guy named Keith Davidson. And what Cohen's going to testify to, if it's consistent with the book, is that with Stormy Daniels, it wasn't a catch and kill. And what Cohen says is that the National Enquirer ultimately wasn't paid. And so the money had to come directly from Trump. And so in Cohen's book, he kind of chronicles himself being the quarterback of this. And so what Cohen does is take out a home equity, wire the money to a company Cohen set up, and then that company paid Daniels. And then after Trump gets elected president, Cohen sends a legal invoice to Trump and then explains that the CFO and operator decided to pay Cohen back. And that's Cohen's version of what happened.
But if Cohen's the quarterback, Dave, if Cohen... And he previously said that he was. Now he's testifying that Trump is always the quarterback of this entire deal, right? But if you establish that Cohen is the quarterback, is that game, set, match?
For Trump?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that would be game, set, match, right? You could establish that Cohen's the quarterback, but Trump still understood and had full knowledge this was happening from A to Z, meaning the payments were being made and they would be recording incorrectly if his motivation, and then we get to the crime part I was talking about with Todd, if his motivation was to further his campaign. Is it important if Trump is or is not the quarterback?
I think it's a fact. I mean, again, I'm not a criminal defense attorney, but I imagine that it has to, the mens rea, showing the intent of what is going on. And so what they'll have to establish is that Trump sort of understood what was happening, as opposed to saying, guys, take care of it and figure out the details.
Okay. All right. So then I'm going to play this for you, Todd. Okay. So what you're saying, Dave, is it's not just going to, if it is just vague in Trump's mind, I've got this issue, you're dealing with it, take care of it. It absolves Trump of mens rea, of the intent, of the knowledge of a crime. So Todd, I'm going to ask you if you agree with that, but listen real quick to this and you see if you think this is any kind of compelling evidence. Here's audio from what happened today. It is a phone call recording that Cohen took when talking with Trump, and it was introduced as evidence.
I think this goes away quickly. I think it's probably better do the Charleston thing just this time. Yeah, in 2 weeks it's fine. I think right now it's better. Okay, honey. You take care of yourself. Thanks, Pam. Yep, I'm proud of you. So long. Bye. What's up, Mike?
Great poll, by the way.
Yeah.
Seen it. Great poll.
Making progress.
Big time.
And you guys are a good guy.
Oh, Pastor Scott?
I can't believe he's... No, Pastor Scott. What's happening?
Oh, no. He's...
Can we use him anymore?
Oh, yeah. 100... No, you're talking about Mark Burns. We've told him
Well,
to...
I don't mean that. Mark Burns, can we use him anymore?
No.
Richard Lefrak, I'm sorry, Richard Lefrak just called. We didn't have a chance. He had an idea for you.
Okay. So we got served from the New York Times. I told you this regarding to unseal the divorce papers with Ivana. We're fighting it. Kaslowitz is going to...
You'll never be able to get that done.
Never. Kaslowitz doesn't think they'll ever be able
to. Pause it right there. Here's what's happened in this call so far. Michael Cohen's walked in with an iPhone. He's standing in front of Trump. He's testified this morning that Trump was unaware that this was being recorded. Back to the attorney-client privilege, Todd. This is crazy. Cohen is recording this conversation. Trump's on the phone. Go ahead.
It just cuts right at the heart of what why at that point in time in his life, where he was devoted to Donald Trump, he was his personal attorney. There was no sign of turbulence or trouble in the water. Why is he rolling tape at that point? Why is he recording his conversation?
So his answer,
imagine.
So his answer to that is he says he's doing it for David Pecker at the National Enquirer. He's saying he has said David Pecker wanted proof that Trump was going to pay him for killing that story. And so he's recording it to show Pecker, here's a commitment from Trump to pay. He's also saying Trump was unaware of that. So, I mean, it's just seedy either way. Even if that's your motivation, you would think, hey, I'm letting David know this is happening. But when the recording starts, Trump is on the phone with somebody he describes as honey, right? I don't know. Ivanka, I don't know, Melania, who knows? And then he hangs up and goes, what's up? And Cohen says, oh, some polls out, great polls, nice job. And then he says there's a New York Times potential story coming out that's going to unseal the divorce records of you and Ivana. And Trump's like, that's ridiculous. How are you going to get into that? Now we'll pick it up, should come the part about where Cohen starts saying something to Trump about David Pecker and the National Enquirer and Karen McDougal. Listen.
Be a Coke, please.
They don't have a legitimate purpose.
And you
so
have a woman that doesn't want to unseal.
Correct.
So you've been handling it.
Yes, and it's all
That's been going on for a while.
for about 2-3 weeks now.
All you have to do is delay it for.
Even after that, it's not going to ever be opened. There's no purpose for it. Told you about Charleston. I need to open up a company for the transfer of all of that info regarding our friend David. So that I'm going to do that right away. I've actually come up and I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up with
So what are we going to pay?
funding. Yes, and it's all the stuff, because you never know where that company, you never know where he's going to be.
Gets it by
Correct. So I'm all over that, and I spoke to Alan about it when it comes time for the financing, which will be.
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
I'll pay with cash.
no. I got no.
Hey, Don, how are you?
Okay, so Todd, just I'll put that to you. What happened at the very end is the key, it seems to be an evidentiary key. This morning, he says, I need to set up a company for our friend David. He's testifying today. That's David Pecker at the National Enquirer. And then he says, as to the financing, and Trump goes, what financing? And he goes, well, we got to pay him something. And Trump says something about cash, where then Cohen goes, no, don't worry. I got that. Don't worry, I got it. That seems a little key. I want to put that to both of you, but Cohen's kind of saying, I'm going to take care of this, and then you'll get legal services bill later, which is exactly what happened, instead of I don't know. How do you see that evidence right there, that call, Todd?
I just don't see where any of those discussions violate the law. I just don't really understand. I mean, they're doing things that seemingly are protected. You've got to pay somebody, they want a service, you're going to pay them, whatever you want to call it. There's no connection to protecting Trump as it pertains to his presidential election campaign in that call. That seems like a normal conversation between an attorney and his client discussing legal matters that do not cross over to me into the criminal realm. That's the best I can say it.
What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think that the David isn't David Pecker in that call. I think it's David Dennison.
Really?
Because in the agreement between Stormy Daniels and either Cohen, Trump, whatever, they used pseudonyms. And so it was between like a Peggy Peterson and a David Dennison. And so that when they talk about setting up this company, that's not the catch and kill. So they're talking about the Stormy Daniels deal. And so what Cohen is telling him is we have to set up this company for our friend David. I think that's what he's referring to there. But again, it doesn't necessarily show Trump's knowledge of what is going on. It may be seedy, it may be dirty, but in terms of it being a crime, I don't see it.
So that's key. That's where I hate to get stuck in the mud because I feel like we've been here for 2 weeks, but that's where we are. What's happening with Cohen today, what happened last week with Stormy Daniels, is confirmation of something seedy or dirty. Unfortunately, for everyone watching and listening, it's also fairly common. Now, it's not common that everybody you know out there is having affairs and signing NDAs to cover them up, but probably way more celebrities than you realize are doing something like that. And the hard thing to separate is seedy and dirty, and this is where I feel like we're stuck in it's kind of like perfect symbolism, stuck in the mud, is not illegal. And for this to be a case about the law, at some point we're going to have to cross this bridge into evidence that shows not seediness and dirtiness, but that shows illegality. And Dave, I'll go to you. Like, what do you think? We're half a day in to what will probably be at least 2 or 3 days of direct, would be my guess, with Michael Cohen. What can he offer us before this is over that's going to cross that bridge from seedy and dirty to illegal?
It's a good question. It's a good question. I think that the idea is sort of the cover up of the payments ultimately. In other words, they set up this company. Michael Cohen takes a home equity line of credit out, pays the company pays Stormy Daniels. And then after the election, he sends invoices to be reimbursed, and they're characterized as legal expenses. And I suppose that is where the alleged fraud is, or to the extent that campaign money was used to pay legal expenses. They're saying, hey, that's a big no-no because you're using campaign money to pay this hush money payment. I imagine that's where it is. But in terms of going back to...
I don't think that is.
Yeah, the ultimate payment...
I don't... Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't think it's about... I mean, it's hard. You're not off base to say it's about campaign finance. Like, did you use campaign funds? Because if Alvin Bragg leaves the ultimate crime kind of this elusive carrot at the end of a stick that you're chasing, it's hard to know. And this is what Trump's complaint has been. What am I defending myself against, right? What is the allegation of the crime beyond the bookkeeping crime, which has run its statute of limitations? They have to prove that, but then they have to prove this other crime on top of it to make it. And it's just hard because it's ill-defined, it's undefined, and I don't know how you cross that bridge. The prosecutor has to cross the bridge. I can't believe, Todd, the defendant doesn't have to have more knowledge of, like, what are you charging me with? Like, what is we're halfway into a trial. What is the specific allegation that told the statute of limitations and gets me sitting here today?
Well, they know what the allegations are. The indictments are right there in front of them, so they know the wording specifically of what must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt for him to be found guilty of any of these offenses. That's up to you can take that back to any criminal case. It's up to the prosecution. They've got the sole burden of proof. They've done the accusing. They must do the proving, meaning they have brought the charges. They went to the grand jury. They got indictments. They worded those the way they wanted them with the evidence they believe they have. Now it's time to prove it in a court of law. And that's the beauty of our system, is an accusation alone is not enough. You've got to be able to prove it when the chips are down and it's time to take it in front of a jury.
Yeah. I mean, that's the idea of the system. I'm not sure it's always the execution of the system. Last thing, Todd, I'm going to ask you about this. There's 2 lawyers on that jury. We're sitting here today talking about attorney-client privilege. We're sitting here today talking about making the leap from dirty and unseemly into illegality. What do you think about the existence of those 2 lawyers? Like, is that good or bad for the defense, for Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends upon what kind of lawyers they are. What's their experience, in the criminal world. Are they practicing attorneys? So it's kind of hard just to throw a blanket over and say, oh, because they're attorneys, that's going to work for him versus against him. In my opinion, I would hope again, you'd say in a perfect world or an ideal situation, that these lawyers would hold the prosecution's feet to the fire, that would demand them to prove their burden, to prove their case, and they would be able to use a legal analysis, a legal mind to say, you never got there, you never made it past that point, you never bridged the gap, as we've been talking about, cross that bridge over into the criminal world. And you would hope that those, at least from Trump's perspective, that those jurors would be strong enough to kind of hold the room once deliberations begin.
Yeah. Dave, what do you think about those two lawyers? You and I had breakfast the other day, and I said, I think I like the gamble from the defense. I like the gamble from Trump. I think you were a little more pessimistic about those two lawyers sitting on the jury.
Well, I agree with you that it's a gamble. I think that ultimately it becomes almost a trial in front of two. You know, when I imagine that when deliberations start, there's going to be a lot of deference to the attorneys. And I imagine they'll take leadership positions in that deliberation room. And so I think the gamble is that these lawyers will do their very best to look at the evidence through the prism of the actual law. And they'll take the jury's instructions and sort of go element by element and explain to the other jurors what the burden of proof is. And that's the hope, is that they will sort of look at the law, look at the evidence, look at the burden of proof. And the gamble is that there'll be a finding of reasonable doubt.
All right, Kat Canby on YouTube says there is no crime. They're still trying to come up with something. Mr. Prince Beat says, love from Switzerland. And I do hope for the U.S. you get Trump again. Great show, Cain. And then finally, I kept you guys here for the final comment I wanted to read. El Donado Trumpez says, does Will have any friends with hair?
I thought that was coming. I was like, how'd you get two bald guys
You
on,
did.
two bald lawyers on at the same time?
Yeah.
As if you didn't know any better. Yeah.
Oh, it's super hard to find them.
Funny.
Two 40-something-year-old lawyers without any hair. That was like finding a needle in a haystack. I don't know how I managed to pull it off. All right, Dave Sugden, Colin Jensen, Todd Shapiro, the Shapiro Law Firm. Thank you guys for coming on. I got to get you guys together in person really soon. But I appreciate you guys jumping on the Will Cain Show. Appreciate you guys.
Awesome. Thanks
You
a
got it,
lot,
buddy.
Will.
Thank you.